A lot to discuss on today's episode, but before we jump on into it, just a quick reminder to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. We are so close to reaching 30,000 subs. If you don't subscribe, your dog's going to leave you for someone that is subscribed. This sucked. I think that's a very easy, quick way to summarize the Falcons' performance against the Saints. And when you have a kicker miss 3 field goals and you lose by 3 points, it does not take a rocket scientist to realize who the finger is going to get pointed at. So let's run through some of the overreactions, although I don't like calling them overreactions once it gets to week 10. At this point, it's pretty fair reactions because we have a good idea as to what we are working with here. But my opening statement is, I am not panicking. I'm not panicking for 2 specific reasons. Your kicker went 1 for 4. Just mathematically, that's not likely going to happen again. It's the first time in his regular season career that Younghoe Koo missed 3 field goals. So it's fair to assume and bet that that's probably not going to be a habit that repeats itself throughout the rest of the year. Unfortunately, it just happened to come in a game where you couldn't afford him to miss 3 field goals. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is, you face an interim head coach. I mean, it is just destiny that the team is going to play harder and get up for the interim head coach in the first game. And I have no doubt that next week the New Orleans Saints are probably going to lose by 30 because they got all their mojo and all their voodoo magic for 1 game. That's the interim head coach boost. I mean, it happens with backup quarterbacks too. Andy Dalton this year, Panthers, first win in in Vegas. Since then, down the drain. Jameis Winston, first game, taking over from Deshaun Watson, 3 touchdowns. Next game, turns back into a pumpkin, 3 interceptions. You just don't want to be the team that plays the interim head coach boost that week. Unlucky little break for Atlanta. If they had played the Saints the next week, they probably would have won this game 27-20. But they got rizzed. So let's run through some of the Week 10 overreactions out there. First one is, should the Falcons cut Younghoe Koo? I am not on board with moving on from Koo just yet because he has shown us a big enough body of work that he is one of the better kickers in football, and his decline is not tied to his age, right? We saw other kickers who were really, really efficient for a long time start to spiral out of control at the end of their career. Like Adam Vinatieri. Remember how bad it was for him at the end of the Colts? We saw that with Steven Gostkowski. At 30 years old, I don't think that his body is declining, and that's why we're seeing him decline. I think it's just he got the yips, and we need to trust that he can get the yips out of his head. And that's a big trust thing to, big piece of trust to make, whatever. But I'm going to choose to buy in. It was bad. I mean, 1 for 4. He had a 35-yard block. He had a 46-yarder go off the upright. He had a 53-yarder go wide left. It was bad. There's no question, doubt about it. I mean, he found a unique trifecta of missed kicks. Block, off the upright, and wide left. All we were missing, I guess, was just short. But it wasn't just this game. This entire season has been down for Koo. 17 of 24, 70%. So for anyone saying they got to cut him, it's hard to argue against that. Is he as good as he was the first couple of years in Atlanta? No, he isn't. Look at the field goal percentage in 2020 through 2022 compared to the last 27 games, all of last year and the first 10 games of this year. It is down 11 points. Now, it's mostly down just because of this season alone. Sure, Koo wasn't as good as he was in the first 3 to 4 years as he was last year, but this is a very new low for Younghoe Koo. But I'm not going to quit on him just yet. For starters, there's no guarantee you find anyone better. Finding kickers is not a very easy task. And the kickers that are available right now are available for a reason. They were losing preseason battles. So I understand after 1 and 4, it's not easy to stand up here and say, I want to stick with that guy. But you take the good with the bad. And there's been mostly bad this year, but came through clutch against the Saints the first time in Atlanta. Came through clutch to force overtime against the Buccaneers. Let's not just completely write those off as we make a pros and cons list for him at the moment. So for the fact that you're not going to probably find anyone much better at this point in early November in free agency, and he has shown us some very clutch moments, which means it's not only a mental thing. Like, he has been able to overcome the ice in his veins moment when he knocked through winners against the Saints and game-tying field goal against the Bucks. I'm going to stick by him. And maybe that looks like a big dumb mistake in a couple of weeks. And he's definitely on thin ice. If it's 1 for 4 next week, that's the end of his time in Atlanta. But I'm going to choose to give him another week. So would you cut Younghoe Koo? Give me a C for cut or K for keep. Type it down below in the comment section. This is the pinned comment, so scroll on down if a YouTube ad break comes on by and let me know. Next up, does the defense suck? I don't really know for sure. Because on one hand, you have like games like the Saints just on Sunday where the first half was dreadful. 17 points allowed. MVS has back-to-back touchdowns in the span of like 5 or 6 plays. It feels like no adjustment was made between one series to the next. But then you also have other games where they lock it down in the second half, just like on Sunday. Now, the Saints offense got off to a flying start in the first half, but they were grounded in the second half. So you got to give some level of credit to the play calling and also just the players on the field for making in-game adjustments and tightening up their bootstraps and pulling up their pants a little bit to make sure that things are getting done in the second half. But we can't completely forget about, the whole first half issues they have. But overall, the Falcons defense is just leaving you wanting more. I mean, they don't really stand out anywhere. They're dead last in sacks. They're 27th in pressures. They're 18th in takeaways, bottom half in the league, and that's the best thing they do. The best thing they do is still 18th in the NFL. That's just not going to cut it. But the thing that really makes me confused on my evaluation for the defense is the way they play in the first half is almost polar opposite than the second half. I mean, they're giving up over 2 touchdowns in the first half through the first 10 weeks of the season. But in the second half, look at the 5-point decrease. I mean, that's a major difference. 5 points is a lot in the NFL. It would have been a whole lot for Atlanta in Week 10 against New Orleans. So, on one hand, we can't just completely erase the first half from our memory when we talk about the evaluation for the defense as a whole. But we do have to acknowledge that it's not an even distribution between the first 2 quarters and the last 2 quarters when we form opinions on offenses and defenses. It's more like a 60-40 split in favor of the second half than a true 50-50 split, even if it isn't equal 30 minutes on both ends. Because at the end of the day, your legacy is defined by what you do in the 2-minute drill at the end of the game, right? That's where NFL moments and Hall of Fame memories are born. So that's why I lean towards it's going to be a rough second half of the season because the defense continues to put themselves in a hole to begin with. Now, there's no game-changing plays from this defense. Jesse Bates is the best player by a mile, but he's a one-man band. He can only do so much. And he's put together, yet again, another really strong season. But someone else at some point has to make a play. Can I get a defensive end to go out there and get a strip sack? Can we get a linebacker outside of Troy Anderson a month and a half ago to step up and intercept a quarterback? It's got to be someone other than 3 every single Sunday. And that's where I look at it as this defense does suck, right? They're just not giving us any level of explosive plays. We always talk about explosive plays for the offense, and it's not easy for the defense because, they're on defense. But there has to be a moment where they just take the game by control, and they go out there and make a play themselves. Unfortunately, the bottom line is Atlanta's offense has to score 24 points or they're going to lose. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Falcons defense gives up an average of 23.5 points a game. So the offense has to go out there every single Sunday and score 24 if they want to win. And that was true on Sunday. I mean, if they had scored a touchdown at the end of the game, they would have won. They would have won 17-20. 23, 24-20, whatever it was. It's not an easy, task for the offense. It's not a fair request to go, hey, if you don't score 24, we don't stand a chance, but that's the bottom line. 24 or that's a loss. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All of that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. The third overreaction that has been tossed out there is whether or not the Falcons are a contender or a pretender. I am not ready to declare them a pretender. You go look at what they've accomplished the first 10 weeks of the season. They sit at 6-4. They've had some really good moments that I think are at a consistent enough hit rate to believe it's not just a fluke. Going to Philadelphia and beating the Eagles. Starting the year off 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0 in the division. I mean, games that you know those players bring a little bit extra juice for, and you start the year off 4-0, and sure, not a very good NFC South, but it's still the NFL. There's 53 paid professionals on the other sideline as well. Sitting at 4-0 going into Week 10 in the division has to be a level of, an accomplishment that we acknowledge. So I am going to lean on they are still a contender, not a pretender, despite an embarrassing Week 10 loss to a Saints team that had 2 wins coming into it, fired their head coach, was missing a lot of players on both sides of the football, traded away Marshawn Lattimore, and Atlanta failed to capitalize on that. But for me, it really will boil down to Week 11. I mean, it's not a win or go home type of game. If Atlanta were to lose Week 11 in Denver against the Broncos, they'd fall to 6-5. They'd still be in first place in the NFC South, and they'd still probably make the playoffs. But I want to see how this team responds, right? How do they come out there and bounce back after a 1-for-4 performance from their field goal kicker, after the defense gives up 17 points in the first half, after the offense turns it over not once but twice with an opportunity to win the game in the last final minutes of the game? I want to see how all 3 of those phases respond against a Broncos team that, if you think it's bad right now in Atlanta after Week 10, no one's got it worse than Denver. They just watched a 35-yard field goal get blocked to win against the undefeated rival Chiefs. That is by far the worst loss of the season. I mean, it recently just topped the Bears losing on a Hail Mary to the Commanders, which was number 1. That's a loss where we're going to really learn a lot about the characters in that Denver locker room. So they're likely going to come out playing hard and playing hungry. So it's going to be a really fun matchup between the Falcons and the Broncos, and we're going to learn about both teams in that game. But like I said, I still feel like they are a contender because they're still in the driver's seat for the NFC South. We're halfway through the season. I mean, I'm not going to make the comp to the Chiefs of last year, but Kansas City showed us that, hey, even when you don't look your best in the regular season, you can still go all the way. The Giants won 2 Super Bowls as the wild card team. There's plenty of history to draw on teams not doing super well in the regular season compared to the other playoff teams and still finding a way to not just win playoff games but go the distance. So, sitting at 6-4, the only thing that I feel like this game really robs you of is having a much easier path to the 2 seed in the NFC. Here's the updated playoff picture, as I think it's about time we start looking at this week to week now. Had they won, they'd be 7-3. They'd have the same number of wins as the Philadelphia Eagles, and they'd have the tiebreaker over them. Now you need some help from Philly to climb from 3 to 2, and you're also tied with the Arizona Cardinals, so you quickly could slip down to the number 4 seed and play the best wild card team of the bunch. But for me, what I'm eyeing the most is I want that 2 seed because I want to see the Falcons have not 1 but 2 home playoff games. You're the 3 or 4 seed, that is not in your control. So, we'll see what this team is made of when they go to Denver this upcoming week. It's a tough upcoming stretch just because they got a lot of road games. I mean, they were home for the first 6, 7 weeks of the year for the most part. Now they face a grueling road stretch. So will the Falcons win a playoff game? Let me know after losing to the Saints whether or not you still think this is a team that can do more than just make the playoffs, but win in the playoffs. Before we sign off, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Dirty Birds Club. Appreciate you guys for being such loyal supporters every single week. Really appreciate everyone who tunes into our watch parties. Make sure to join us on Sunday for our watch parties as well. We're bringing those back. We had, was a successful watch party in some regard, except the whole score part. So really not that successful, I guess, looking back at it against the Saints. But we're going to keep the good times rolling over the next couple of weeks as well. All right, that will do it for us on today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give us a like down below, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.